As I'm sure everyone in the Poké community already knows, Paldea is based on the Iberian Peninsula and makes references to Central America as well as Plato's story of Atlantis. But did you know that Area Zero is inspired by the Caldera de Taburiente in Spain, and the Crystal Pool is inspired by Okama Crater Lake in Japan? The Spanish word Calderas connects many of the dots behind the lore of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, unveiling how this all links back to the ancient location of Atlantis, World War II, and reveals the true message of the games. Or at least that's what I believe I've discovered, and now it's time for me to deliver the evidence to you. The Caldera de Taburiente in Spain has many specific details referenced by Area Zero in the games. Immediately, they share a striking resemblance to each other with their relatively circular rims peeking out over the clouds. Beneath, beautiful and lush landscapes sprawl throughout its valleys. Did I mention it's located in Spain, which Paldea is based on? Scientists believe the crater was created about 2 million years ago, exactly like it is revealed that Area Zero is about 2 million years old in the final part of the DLC. Similar to all of the resources that Paldea and the academies put into studying Area Zero, the International Union of Geological Sciences designated the Caldera de Taburiente a key geological heritage site of scientific relevance. And the Roque de los Muchachos Observatory with its telescopes are located on the same island. A significant story regarding the history of the caldera is the story of Christian Leopold von Buch, who ventured to the Canary Islands in 1815 and kept records of his travels in a journal just like Heath in his Scarlet and Violet journals during his expedition into Area Zero. Christian Leopold von Buch was particularly intrigued by the geology of the region and journaled about details that caused him to believe the expanse of the crater was not caused by a volcanic eruption, but by erosion much later after the initial eruption had happened. Just like the journals in the last part of the DLC about the deeper parts of Area Zero being created later by erosion. This is how the word caldera first became a geological term, from Christian Leopold von Buch's use of the word when describing the Caldera de Taburiente in his journals from his journey. Before, the word's only usage was as a Spanish word for cooking pot or cauldron, which the creators of the game certainly emphasized with Pokémon as well this generation. Like the bowl-shaped ground caused by the ruin of a caldera, we have the darkened ground-typed ruinous Pokémon Ting Lu, who has a giant vessel on his head, and the ability to split the earth open with fissures, much like a volcano. Ting Lu is also inspired by the Suite of Cups in the tarot cards, but that's for a whole other video. This generation of Pokémon also brought us Sinistcha, who is also very much a cup, or rather, very much resides inside of a cup. So, bowl, cauldron, and cup-like shapes are aplenty in Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, and it feels very intentional. Almost like an emphasis on the nature of Area Zero being of a caldera. The Caldera de Taburiente started forming 2 million years ago from a disc-shaped shield volcano that became dormant. If Area Zero is inspired by the Caldera de Taburiente specifically, then it makes sense that Terrapagos at the root of Area Zero references the dormant shield volcano that created the Caldera de Taburiente 2 million years ago. Not only does the timing match up perfectly, but also at the start of the very first official announcement of Terrapagos, the first thing that was revealed about Terrapagos was that it can crystallize the energy in its body to form a protective shield, like the shield volcano that created the Caldera de Taburiente. The very next thing that the very first official announcement of Terrapagos revealed about the Pokémon is that it can also assume a dormant state, just like the dormant state of the shield volcano at the Caldera de Taburiente. A couple of last little notes on this caldera. The Caldera de Taburiente is a place home to such landscapes, such plant life, and such fauna as we had never seen, as it has a population of endangered Canary Island junipers, and has been designated an important bird area. In fact, all of these photos of birds are species that live around the Caldera de Taburiente and have Pokémon from the new generation that look very similar to them. Also, in the 1830s, the crater notably inspired a couple of artists who were creating art combined with a study of geology and botany. Which reminds me of the sketches by a survey team member that are called out in Heath's journal. But okay, on to our next big discovery. Look how strikingly visually similar Okama Crater Lake in Japan is to the crystal pool of Kitakami. It is a beautiful gem of a pool located within the peaking rim of Mount Zhao, just like the crystal pool within the peaking rim of Oni Mountain. Known as the five-color pond, Okama Crater Lake changes color throughout the day and the seasons of the year, just like the color-changing terra crystals of the crystal pool and the theme of time throughout the games. Also, a big reason this theory works so well is that most Poke theorists have concluded that Kitakami is inspired by the Tōhoku region of Japan, and Okama Crater Lake is located in Kawasaki, Miyagi, on the border of Yamagata, or in other words, right smack in the Tōhoku region of Japan where it should be. Okama Crater Lake is a caldera that was created by a volcano that is now dormant, just like the Caldera de Taburiente and Terrapagos. Sinistra even makes a very cute return here as a reference to Okama Crater Lake, if you can believe it, because Okama is a Japanese word that means honorable cauldron. And as many fans of Pokemon know, Sinistra comes in two forms: unremarkable form Sinistra and masterpiece form Sinistra, the latter of which lives inside a superb teacup that was crafted by a potter of great renown. Seeing as Sinistra is a new Pokemon only obtainable from the Kitakami region, and Kitakami is based on the Tōhoku region of Japan, it totally makes sense that this renowned little teacup is referencing the honorable cauldron in the name of Okama Crater Lake from the same Tōhoku region of Japan. So, at this point, you might be thinking, wait, I thought Area Zero was created by an impact. You may not be familiar with the idea that Area Zero could have been created from volcanic activity, or you may have already seen Drogane's video about Area Zero being a volcano. But there's so much more to it! The games intentionally create a mystery around the creation of Area Zero. They want mysteries to remain unresolved so that something is off and the player is left wondering. It's a challenge for those who are curious enough to explore deeper and connect the dots. Almost like an ancient mystery school. Think about it. Why is there so much mystery behind how Area Zero was created? It's discussed in Ryfort's history class and all the way throughout the games, even up through the end of the DLC, with some of the final pieces of lore given to us, adding details that uncover clues to the creation of Area Zero. Could they really expect the players of these games to all be a bunch of geology nerds? Or could there be more to it? This element of mystery in the origins of a structure can also be found throughout the history of calderas, even going back to the creation of the geological term itself. As we discussed, the term was created by Christian Leopold von Buch, who was so intrigued by the Caldera de Taburiente that he put forth a unique theory for what could have created such a cauldron-like structure in his journals. Calderas all over the earth have caused many theories to be put forth for their creation, just like many theories have been put forth about the creation of Area Zero. One that many initially think about both Calderas and Area Zero is that they were created from an impact with a meteorite. Funny how they brought the Pokémon with a meteor form, Meteor, back for these games. Could this be why? There are many overlapping features to both meteorite impact craters and volcanic craters, like their bowl-like shape, elevated rim, and their ability to create crystals. Much like the Terra crystals of Area Zero and the Crystal Pool. Yes, that's right, impact and volcanic craters create crystals, and as we all know, Terra crystals are one of the biggest aspects of the games, which come out of both Area Zero and the Crystal Pool. So why do Poke theorists believe that the description of Area Zero lines up with volcanic craters instead of impact craters? 4 main reasons. Deep versus shallow, erosion and tectonic causes, fertile land, and hexagonal structures. Allow me to explain. It has been pointed out that craters caused by meteorites are typically more shallow than craters caused by volcanic activity, and Area Zero is certainly not shallow. It's even revealed in the Indigo Disk DLC that the event that caused the initial crater of Area Zero was followed by many tectonic and erosion events, creating further depths to Area Zero and expanding its history from over 1 million years old to 2 million years old. This explanation, unveiled by the DLC, supports a volcanic creation of the crater of Paldea as opposed to an impact event, because although tectonics and erosion can affect both, they are key elements in the creation of volcanic craters and not of impact craters. This also applies to the Crystal Pool, as it is located at the top of Oni Mountain, is shaped like a cauldron, has a peaking rim, and has deep caves going down beneath it into the interior of the mountain. Speaking of shapes at Area Zero and the Crystal Pool that indicate a volcanic crater, hexagons play a huge role in the creation of volcanic craters. Over 90% of all volcanic rock on Earth is made of basalt, and basalt does this cool thing when it cools down in the right way. It forms hexagonal columns, just like the hexagonal shape of the Terra crystals in Area Zero and the Crystal Pool. The idea that the hexagons of Area Zero and the Crystal Pool are referencing their volcanic creation is emphasized further when considering the amount of focus the creators of the games have put on hexagonal shapes. Not only can hexagons be found heavily featured in Area Zero and the Crystal Pool, but they can also be found heavily featured all throughout the design of the games, including the graphic for the hidden treasure of Area Zero, the illustration of the legendary treasure, the illustrations for the Phantom Memory page, the illustration and description of the disc Pokémon, the architecture of the bases and time machine, the shape of Suikun's crystal horn, the shape of Walking Wake's crystal horn, the shape of the Terra symbol in the Terra orb, the artwork of Brassius, really all throughout the Pokemon franchise, and Jacques' glasses, which is so conveniently pointed out to us by Hassel. The art professor at Yuva or Naranha Academy gives us a whole class about sacred geometry in nature and Jacques' glasses when he says, "Now, here's some trivia about snowflakes. While snowflakes come in many different shapes and sizes, most are classified as hexagons. Just think of it. Snowflakes fall from the sky, taking similar shapes without anyone saying they must. Do you not feel the great mystery of nature? The beautiful enigma we live in?" This is a bit of a tangent, but Mr. Jacques' glasses are also hexagonal, aren't they? So yeah, the creators of the games are really out here like, do you notice any hexagons in nature? Anywhere? What could that mean? In the classes they want you to go to at the academies that the games in the Paldean region are centered around. Another key factor that distinguishes Area Zero as a volcanic crater instead of an impact crater is that volcanic craters cause a huge boost in the fertility of the land, while impact craters do not. Fertile land is a theme that reoccurs throughout the lore of Area Zero, as I've heard other Poke theorists make note of before. But what I have not heard anyone make note of is that this fertility theme is also paralleled in Atlantean flood myths, leading researchers to believe that Atlantis could have been destroyed by a volcanic eruption. Let's compare the following passages about Atlantis and Area Zero and let me know if you think they sound similar. In Critias, Plato describes Atlantis, writing, "There was ample pasture for this, the largest and most voracious of brutes, no less than for all the other creatures of marsh, lake and river, mountain and plain. Besides all of this, the soil bore all aromatic substances still to be found on earth. Roots, stalks, canes, gums, exuded by flowers and fruits, and they throve on it. The fruit of trees that ministers to our pleasure and merriment, and is so hard to preserve, and that we serve as welcome dessert to a jaded man to charm away his satiety. All these were produced by that sacred island, which then lay open to the sun." In the Scarlet and Violet journals, Heath writes, "Within the great crater of Paldea lies the mysterious Area Zero, a place home to such landscapes, such plant life, and such Pokémon as we had never seen. Area Zero was home to wondrous herbs that instantly impart vigor when eaten. The herbs were eaten by Pokémon, which in turn grew large and strong. Vegetation and sources of water are here as well. Legends tell that precious stones or wondrous fruits have long slept in Area Zero's depths." If you look at those passages side by side, it's a pretty perfect parallel, and they both use a lot of the same words. Plato even mentions ample pasture for the largest and most voracious brutes, like the brutal attacks from the Titan Pokémon, oversized from eating the herbs of Area Zero. Interestingly enough, hexagonal shapes have also been linked to Atlantean myths. In Atlantis, Egyptian Genesis, Ian Driscoll and Matthew Kurtz present myths from all around the world that share close parallels to Plato's story of Atlantis, including the reoccurring reference to a sturdy, reed-like structural material used in construction. The Hindu tale of the island of Bendu is one of the myths considered to be a parallel of Atlantis, and it details the throne of the goddess Maya as being specifically hexagonal. So, it's been theorized that the recurring reeds referenced by Atlantean myths are referencing basalt columns being used in construction, as has happened throughout history. If all of this is true, then Atlantis could be located near a volcano with basalt columns, and this would be the case for almost every caldera on Earth. The Azores of Portugal, that Paldea is partially based on, has a caldera named Caldera Volcano with a particularly large amount of basalt. And due to this and many other reasons, many have theorized that this is the location of the ancient capital of Atlantis. Considering the fact that the creators of Pokémon love to make amalgamations of things from our real world, like Eevee, and even of things of the Poké world, like the imagined Pokémon in Heath's journals, I wouldn't be surprised if Area Zero is an amalgamation of Spain's Caldera de Taburiente and Portugal's Caldera Volcano in the Azores. Not only was Caldera Volcano also a victim of erosion, but it is also notably believed to have arose from tectonics, which are also mentioned in the journals of the Indigo Disc DLC. An additional link between the Azores of Portugal and the Canary Islands of Spain is that many researchers in modern times have claimed that these islands are the ancient location of Atlantis. These theories are huge. The Wikipedia page for Location Hypothesis of Atlantis has whole sections for Azores Islands and the Canary Islands of Spain, and for northern Spain. The regional sections on the Wikipedia page are right beneath the section of the page devoted to the Richat structure in Mauritania and are much larger sections of the page. I must make a quick mention of the Richat structure in Mauritania, because Jimmy Corsetti has been making huge waves across the internet presenting the theory that the Richat structure was the location of the capital city of Atlantis on his YouTube channel Bright Insight. And it's interesting to note that the Richat structure also contains a caldera at its center and is the result of volcanic activity. But back to the Canary and Azores Islands. As we know, Paldea is based primarily on the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, and Portugal, and Paldea makes references to Atlantis. The calderas that I have discovered Area Zero to be based on are in the Canary Islands of Spain and the Azores Islands of Portugal, which are together one of the most prominent theoretical locations of Atlantis. But wait, there's more. What if I told you that there's a man who is one of the most prominent historical figures on Earth and who studied the volcanoes of the Canary and Azores Islands, proclaiming them to be the lost ancient location of Atlantis, as well as the skeletal structure of the Earth, pumping with lava like blood through a gigantic body? Does that sound familiar to anyone? I believe I've discovered the inspiration for Oni Mountain and Paldea's shape resembling a gigantic Terapagos. Athanasius Kircher, who some consider to be the founder of Egyptology, studied volcanoes and wrote a book called Mundus Subterraneus, claiming that Atlantis was in the Canary and Azores Islands of Spain and Portugal, the very same islands containing the calderas that I believe to be the inspiration for Area Zero. In this very book about these very volcanic calderas, Athanasius Kircher describes the planet Earth as a giant body with interior structures like vessels or bowels transporting fire and water, which sculpts the Earth and reveals mountains. The mountains of Earth, according to Kircher's fanciful descriptions, are the strong skeletal structure of the planet that remains from the destructive forces of its shifting, much like the skeletal structure of Oni Mountain and Area Zero amongst situations like those described by the Pokédex entries for the ruinous Pokémon. There has been a lot of discussion in the Pokémon community about the possibility that Paldea is one large Terapagos, so much so that it is widely considered to be blatantly intentionally suggested by the creators. The reveal of the tininess of Terapagos led to many additional theories, including the theory that there is another version of Terapagos that is even larger than the terastallized form and has yet to be seen. I have some theories on this that I am still researching, but this connection to Athanasius Kircher's skeletal mountain description from his book about the calderas of the Canary and Azores Islands being clues to the lost ancient location of Atlantis is connected in too many ways to be a coincidence, if you ask me. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, Pokémon Scarlet and Violet makes many direct references to Atlantis, so we know Atlantis is relevant. If you didn't already know, the internet has revealed that the name for the map of Paldea in the game's code is Atlantis, but there's so much more. The idea that more ancient civilizations have existed in Paldea than we are currently aware of is presented multiple times throughout the games, with the characters often questioning the age of many places and objects. In Heath's Scarlet and Violet books, he writes about how when his team was first exploring Area Zero, they discovered a buried metal plate inscribed with a strange symbol. They were unable to scratch the plate, so even determining the nature of the metal seemed beyond modern science, meaning something more advanced than even their own science was found buried in an ancient location that had not yet been explored by humans to their knowledge. implying an ancient advanced civilization existed in Area Zero, like Atlantis. Plato also writes about strange inscriptions written on a strange metal lost to history called orichalcum at Atlantis in Critias, and the wall of the actual Acropolis with orichalcum which gleamed like fire. Within the roof was throughout of ivory, ornamented with gold, silver, and orichalcum, and all the rest, walls, columns, pavement, were covered with orichalcum. They were informed by the law and by an inscription left by the earliest kings on a column of orichalcum preserved in the sanctuary of Poseidon in the center of the island. Iron Bundle's Scarlet Pokédex entry talks of claims that it is a robot created by an ancient civilization similar to the ancient advanced civilization of Atlantis. The main legendary of Pokémon Scarlet, the box legendary featured on the cover, Koraidon, has a special ability, and that special ability is even called Orichalcum Pulse. Orichalcum is linked to Plato and his story of Atlantis so strongly that a quick Google search for Orichalcum will give you the first paragraph summary on Wikipedia, which reads: Orichalcum is a metal mentioned in several ancient writings, including the story of Atlantis in the Critias of Plato. Orichalcum was also used to make coins, like Gimmighoul. There's even a passage in Plato's Critias that describes orichalcum and the pulse of the land of Atlantis, giving us the inspiration for Koraidon's special ability, Orichalcum Pulse. And for perhaps the most direct reference of all, if you play through all of the events of Rhyfort's friendship quest, she tells you the fairy tale of the ruinous Pokémon. And it is obviously a direct reference and parallel to Plato's story of Atlantis, as it is about a prosperous, fertile kingdom that is destroyed in just one night because of their hubris. The fact that researchers of our real world are debating whether or not the mythical empire of Atlantis even existed and the specific details of its existence fits right in with the lore of the game and three of the main dualistic themes they present: fact versus fiction, history versus myth, and of course, past versus future. Atlantis has inspired the masses since ancient times, despite the modern mainstream's insistence that it is merely a myth. Just like Rhyfort's belief in the fairy tale of the ruinous Pokémon and those who believe in Heath's Scarlet and Violet books, while the masses consider him to be a liar. So, okay, what are they trying to say with all of this? Calderas, Atlantis, all of the themes? Well, when reviewing the various kinds of craters on Wikipedia to determine which one Area Zero matches most closely, pretty much every one of the types stick out as relevant to the Japanese origins of these games. Some more than others. Some are about geology, and some are more related to events in human history caused by humans. Let's see if you see what I'm saying. The types of craters include impact craters, like the one theorized to be off an island south of Tokyo, or the one caused intentionally by a Japanese spacecraft on asteroid Ryugu. Volcanic craters, which are abundant in the highly volcanic region that Japan is in. Explosion craters, like the ones from nuclear bombs. Pit craters, that are caused by various volcanic activities, which are once again very common in Japan's region. And subsidence craters, which are caused by underground nuclear explosions. 2 out of those 5 types include nuclear explosions. So, if you're trying to determine what caused the crater of Area Zero, you are bound to come across the idea of nuclear weapons. Why would the Japanese creators of these games want us to reflect on nuclear weapons? Well, Did you know that the idea that Atlantis was real played a surprisingly large role in the ideas and events of World War II, which led to the major ruinous events in Japan that have shaped not only the country where these games were created, but also all of human history? He who shall not be named himself allegedly went on an expedition to Antarctica to discover Atlantis, and because of this, the US Navy later sent Admiral Richard E. Byrd to Antarctica to investigate. This Admiral Richard E. Byrd? He is straight up a parallel of Heath that Heath's story directly references. It's a theory that I have yet to hear anyone else discussing, that the creators of Pokémon were referencing Admiral Richard E. Byrd with their character Heath. I've been sure of it for a while now. I mean, the Admiral's son published his journal after his death, and in the journal he claims to encounter woolly mammoths and time-traveling discs during an expedition with his beloved pet to a crystal city glowing rainbow hues, all inside of a crater. That's not all, because the book also claims that the people of Atlantis tell Admiral Richard E. Byrd that they have contacted him specifically out of concern for the atomic bombing of Japan and humanity's continued creation of nuclear weapons. Also, one of Admiral Richard E. Byrd's most known achievements is having discovered Mount Sidley, the largest dormant volcano in Antarctica. Speaking of volcanoes, Admiral Richard E. Byrd's story involves another big topic in the worlds of the occult and conspiracy theories that it also shares with Heath's: inner Earth. And when it comes to theories of inner worlds beneath Earth's crust, Admiral Richard E. Byrd specifically references one man's theories and illustrations in his journal. And guess who that man is? Athanasius Kircher, who we discussed earlier in the video. So all of this is connected, even down to the symbols featured throughout the games, which to me are clearly references to swastikas and the Germanic runes, which were very relevant during World War II. Although I also believe they reference Spanish, Kabbalistic, Jungian, and Platonic sacred geometry, crop circles, and mandalas. But you can learn more about that on my channel. Admiral Richard E. Byrd's journal even mentions the disc-shaped crafts having swastikas on them. And Operation High Jump, the code name for Admiral Richard E. Byrd's expedition to Antarctica, is a very popular topic, even on YouTube. There are a lot more specific details paralleled by Admiral Richard E. Byrd's missing diary and Heath's journals, which you can learn about on my channel. But from what we already know, a message can clearly be learned from the story of these games. Atlantis was allegedly a civilization advancing in technology for their own hubris, and because of it, they were ruined. The Third Reich was a civilization advancing in technology for their own hubris, and because of it, they were ruined. And Admiral Richard E. Byrd was allegedly warned by the people of Atlantis to never do what we did to Japan to anyone ever again. Could this be the core message of the main storyline of the games? The moral of the story? We see it in the ruinous events that befell the king in Ryfort's fairy tale, and the climax of the plot with the professor's downfall, giving up their lives for technology in a Faustian pact. There is a lot more to the Faustian aspects of this story. In fact, there's so much more to my theory on these games. Like how more evidence of a link to World War II can be found in the inspiration Scarlet and Violet takes from Carl Jung's book about the time-traveling discs of World War II, called Flying Saucers, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Skies, or his Red Book. and more exciting discoveries on how these games are specifically inspired by Plato and Carl Jung's work. Learn more about these subjects and so much more in this video here that explains my overall theory for the arcane, esoteric, and occult inspirations in the lore of Scarlet and Violet. Welcome aboard Vessel X. I.